Your Superior Self, episode 45.
I really needed to sit up and pay attention to my epilepsy because I thought I had it nailed. I thought for a certain amount of time that I'd gotten my seizures under control by 2015 and that I had this figured out. And you don't always have it figured out. It sneaks up on you. Our bodies are really clever at outmaneuvering different medications. And there's a lot you have to listen to. Again, listening to the cues of your own body and your own head and finding that yes and okay, this is what is working. So that was a big lesson because suddenly I had nowhere to go. My mouth was wired shut. I could write a little bit on a piece of paper in between, the surgeries and the medications and whatnot. But there was a lot of work to do to figure out how to not be devastated.
What is going on, Superior Nation? I am Trey Downs, and this is your Superior Self podcast. I am a blue-collar worker turned into blue-collar entrepreneur, and each week I will interview inspiring influencers who will help you become your superior self. Thank you for joining me today, and let's get after it. During the month of January, I will be reading excerpts from the book, The 48 Laws of Power, written by Robert Greene. It is a national bestseller. It also has been banned from numerous prison institutions due to the influence of these laws. And the law that I'll be reading today is Law 29. Plan all the way to the end, which I don't do. So reading this law has definitely opened my eyes to what I should be doing and how I should be planning. And it says, the ending is everything. Plan all the way to it, taking into account all the possible consequences, obstacles, and twists of fortune that might reverse your hard work and give the glory to others. By planning to the end, you will not be overwhelmed by circumstances, and you will know when to stop. Gently guide fortune and help determine the future by thinking far ahead. Law 29 goes on to say, the dangers that are remote, that loom in the distance, if we can see them as they take shape, how many mistakes we avoid, how many plans we would instantly abort if we realized we were avoiding a small danger, only to step into a larger one. So much of power is not what you do, but what you do not do. The rash and the foolish actions that you refrain from before they get you into trouble. Plan in detail before you act. Do not let vague plans lead you into trouble. Will this have unintended consequences? Will I stir up new enemies? Will someone else take advantage of my labors? Unhappy endings are much more common than happy ones. Do not be swayed by the happy ending in your mind. And I take that as the visions that we have for our goals, the endpoint, the area of success that we pretend to be going towards in our minds. It looks awesome and it's very vague, and we have this simple idea of where we want to go and how we want to get there. But in this law, it tells you to start planning to be very precise in how you achieve that success, because then you can kind of anticipate the little things that are going to pop up along your journey, and you can kind of have a plan to deal with those. Whereas if it's very vague, if it's very thrown together, like you're not going to be able to plan for those unexpected changes or unexpected things that pop up during your journey. You need to have a well-defined plan of where you want to go and how you're going to achieve your success, whatever that might be for you, whatever goal that you have at the end of your journey. It needs to be planned precisely on how you're going to get there and how you're going to achieve your success. And before I dive into the interview, I wanted to hit on a couple of topics before I forget. One being the mastermind group It is Your Superior Mastermind Group. I have started it because I want to build a community around the podcast, be more involved with your development. So I've started this group. It is a diverse group of individuals that have the same desire to be successful, and that's what we do. We support one another in our endeavors of success and help each other achieve the goals that maybe we don't have the confidence to achieve on our own. So we hold each other accountable for those goals, and we make sure that we reach success together. So if you're interested in belonging to a group like that, I have 2 slots left. You can go to my Instagram account at tdowns80, click on the link in my bio, and it will take you to an application site. I can't even say that right. Application site where you can apply to be in Your Superior Mastermind Group. Also, check me out on Twitter at DownsTrey. You can follow us there. And also check me out on Facebook, Your Superior Self. Join the community that I'm trying to build over there. I post a ton of inspirational quotes along with post a couple things, behind the scenes with the podcast. So if you're interested in that, please check us out over there. I'd love to hear your feedback. Please email me at traydowns@superiorself.net. I love to hear your comments, your concerns, anything that involves you trying to get better, you trying to grow as an individual, and you becoming your superior self. So follow me over there. I love hearing from you guys. And without further ado, my guest today is Alisa Kennedy Jones. She's an American memoirist, blogger, novelist, and awkward public speaker. And I think we all can relate to that a little bit. A regular contributor to NPR, her widely popular blog, Gotham Girl, has amassed nearly 50,000 followers worldwide. That is incredible. Her new book, Gotham Girl Interrupted, My Misadventures in Motherhood, Love, and Epilepsy, hit the bookstores back in November, so make sure you guys go pick that up. Alisa had her first seizure when she was diagnosed with ecstatic epilepsy when she was 40 years old. Suddenly being a person who had seizures created an interesting set of obstacles and rules, but also an interesting set of possibilities. In the new book, she shares a collection of comedic essays about life with epilepsy as a single mother in Manhattan. And she doesn't shy away from the brash truths that define the way she lives now and presents each through laugh out loud stories from her life. I know you guys are excited about it, and so am I. Here is my interview with Gotham Girl, Alisa Kennedy Jones. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Your Superior Self. Tonight, I am excited to have on this show Alisa Kennedy Jones. She is a writer for TV and theater with credits including A Girl and a Gun and Uluwatu. She also has a background working in digital advertising, branding, and strategy for clients such as GE, Coca-Cola, Tommy Hilfiger, Disney, Electronic Arts, and Colgate Palmolive. She writes the blog Gotham Girl, currently almost 30,000 followers on Twitter. That's insane. And is an NPR commentator who is active in the autism, human rights, and neurodiversity communities. So welcome to the show, Alisa. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So for my listeners who haven't quite heard of you yet, which I have a feeling they will in the future, give us like a quick rundown about what you're doing today.
What I'm doing today is I am working in a number of different areas in writing. I've just had a book come out called Gotham Girl Interrupted. I've been writing about different neurodiversity types of folks, whether it's people on the autism spectrum, people with epilepsy, people with different neurological conditions, but then also basic New York weirdos for the last 10 years, and have been working alongside a number of different corporate brands, as you know, and on a number of creative projects. And I was on my way to kind of, living my best life, as Oprah says, when I suddenly, at age 40, had a massive grand mal seizure in my kitchen and found myself diagnosed with a type of very severe epilepsy that suddenly impacted every part of my life. And there was very little information out in the world other than, and even from the doctors, about why it was happening, what was causing, what was triggering the seizures, what I could do to prevent them other than experiment with a lot of different anticonvulsant drugs. And so I had my work cut out for me. I had a lot of learning to do. It was a pretty steep curve, and ended up having a number of different adventures and waking up in a number of different places with different characters and people that gradually over the years found their way into a book of essays, comedic essays called Gotham Girl Interrupted. And that just came out, and now I'm on the tour for that. So thank you for having me in the middle of every.
Yeah, I don't know how you have the time to do the book tour and then come on a podcast, and it's crazy. I mean, especially in today's world of just being busy, busy, busy. I think you're also a single parent, correct?
I am, but my kids are older now, so it's a different dynamic when your kids grow up. So this is probably the first time that I've had any time to do the kinds of things like finish the book. I really took a lot of time. I took a year off to dive in and write the essays and write the stories. They're based on a TED Talk I gave several years ago, out in California. And no, I have, I think it's just a question of focusing and prioritizing, compartmentalizing, and I do a really bad job of it most of the time. I have to say. I mean, I do, there are moments where I'm running around like a crazy chicken. And then there are other moments where I am like, you know what, we can just sit down and have a conversation. It's what it is. It's not the most difficult thing in the world. The book tour, fortunately, has been really flexible and been a great time. It's been a great time to have some real downtime in between the readings. So that's been nice.
Well, let's be honest here. It doesn't matter how old your children get; they're still a pain in the
They
ass.
need you.
They still need you, and they still call you, and they still need you. I mean, I have two children right now, 8 and 6. That's a little bit different than what you may have, but let's face it. I was one of those kids, a millennial, that of course it was hard to get me out of the house. I think it was 21 or so when I moved out. I can't remember, but I mean, even though they're older, I mean, you still have to live with them always, figuring out when you're on the phone and then chiming in and trying to talk to you at the same time you're trying to make a business call or have a podcast or anything like that. So I know exactly.
No, you're reminding me of something funny. No, my kids are amazing, and they've been very supportive, and they've also had to witness a lot of what I've dealt with epilepsy, and especially my younger daughter. And so I guess, they knew also because I've been a single parent for a long stretch of time. They knew under pain of death. It was like, do not, I'm on a conference call, do not bug mom. You better be bleeding. And I mean, really bleeding, 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 and just really suffering tremendously if you're going to interrupt the call with the client. And fortunately, advertising and brand strategy and working as a writer has been that kind of flexible career that's let me work at home. So, but they've also understood that, when I need to make a call and when I need to be on a Skype or a Zoom or whatever. And the one time is actually, it's a story. I mean, Sophie knew, I mean, not to come into this very, very tense conference call that I was having with one of our clients who was really, struggling. They were to understand, the direction the campaign was going and the different data points. And she comes in with, my youngest daughter comes in with a Post-it, and she's looks really panicked. Her eyes are just bulging out of her head, and she's just completely frantic. And she's kind of patting her chest just a little bit, and she's holding up the post-it. And it's like, and I was like, not now, not now. Come on, this is not okay. You know this is not okay. And she holds up a post-it, and it says Tiddlywink on it. And she has choked. She is 12 at this time, I think. So yeah, she's 12. She's choked on a Tiddlywink. She's choking on a Tiddlywink with the client on the phone, on the conference call in front of me. And I'm on the call and I'm muting. I whip her around and I give her the high, which I don't think I've ever really done that for anyone before, but I'd seen it on everything. And then she swallowed. I mean, 'cause it went, instead of going out, it went down. And so, I mean, she swallowed the tiddlywink, and I'm like, this is not how you tiddle. This is not how anything. This is, what was it doing in your mouth? But it's the perfect size object to choke on, just for future reference. As your kids get older, they will still put things in their mouths. And you will still have to give them the Heimlich and then take them to the emergency room. So when I say everything happens and you're like, I'm problem solving. I'm not panicking. Things had just happened.
So she wrote Tiddlywink?
Yes. And I looked at her and I could see her eyes like
Tiddlywink.
watering. And I was like, oh, you're choking on a Tiddlywink to put it in your mouth. And that is exactly the kind of, I mean, those moments happen. And then you need to come back to, like, you know, level of calm that everyone's like, okay, we need to have no drama for the next at least 3 days. Can we have that? Can we try for that?
I have to tell you, I might have choked because I don't know how to spell tiddlywink. I think I would have spelled choke or choking.
No, I just was like, what the heck was that doing in your mouth? But then I just know, but I know her because obviously I'm like, why did you, So yeah, you put the client on mute, you give your kid the Heimlich, you then say you've got to go, you've had a family emergency, and then you rush to fortunately, at that point in time, we lived near a pediatric ER, and the doctor was like, how did this happen? This is not, this is not what's supposed to be happening. But I think as a single parent, I mean, and even as a parent with a partner, all the time you're struggling. So it's hard.
Yeah, sure it is.
You've got going on.
Especially when you're trying to do an important conference call about the tour and your kid is choking on a tiddlywink. I don't even know what that is. What is a tiddlywink?
Yeah, a tiddlywink. Okay, it's a game from like I played it in the 1970s. I'm 48, and I played it in the 1970s. It's where you kind of, it's like a little coin, plastic yellow coin, and that you use to like get enough leverage to flip another coin into the right little zone of points on the board. And so, I don't know how we got that game, but we have a lot of games because I had worked for EA for a time. And so playing is sort of natural to our household. And so whatever game, whether it's Bananagrams or Monopoly or whatnot, but this one threw me for a loop. I don't know if we tossed the Tiddlywinks after that. They definitely did not end up in anyone's mouth ever again. So,
oh my goodness! Like I said, I would have choked and died right there because I don't know how to spell tiddlywink. I would have, by the time it took me to write down tiddlywink on the note, I would have been dead. Like,
well, to be truthful, I had to look up how to spell it when I was writing about it on the blog. I was like, okay, so this is one, because I failed a lot as a mother, many times over. I am so humbled by parenthood at any given moment in my life. But the one, I had to Google it to spell it correctly for the blog because it kept coming up wrong. So, I think I would have died as well. At least we understood each other. I mean,
yeah.
Thank goodness. So you have that bond.
Well, talk about the blog. You talk about a ton of misadventures in motherhood. So I think a lot of people, especially single parents, think of, have this idea of parenthood in their minds that they have to be this perfect idol for your children, perfect parent, whatever. But I don't think that exists. I think that we just do our best, right? I mean, is this what you talk about in the blog?
The blog, I write a lot about New York City and New York City people and everything being a little bit broken in New York. I do write about motherhood to a certain extent in the blog from post to post. But no, I guess we have ideals about our parents, and we grew up, presumably looking up to them, and they're our heroes, and they're the people who inform our values and our senses of humor, our vocabularies, and the way we look at the world, at least for a certain amount of time. But no, you're humbled pretty quickly, and your kids figure out pretty quickly that you're not perfect. And I think the more, I don't know, I'm the last person to give parenting advice, I think, because I think it's like a game of improvisation to a certain extent. You're doing a lot of the rules of improv theater or improv comedy, which are yes and that your kids give you a lot of the cues for what you need to do. And these are the same kind of cues that I listen to in my own life from myself. It's just like I need to be listening to my own cues now and then, but your kids give you all the cues, and you just need to be hearing them and not trying to, I do think, I had expectations about how my kids' lives would be. And to a certain extent, my job is really just to love them and be there for them and try to be better in whenever I can. It's really hard. Oh, I'm sorry, that's probably my computer. It's really hard when I think you're chronically ill with something like epilepsy and having seizures. I think the thing that I worried about the most with my kids is that they would be traumatized by my condition. And but I think that the thing that I worried about most was their processing of seeing their mom potentially die in front of them repeatedly. That's heavy, and that's heavy for a kid to handle. And they need to be able to feel their feelings and process the way that they would that works for them. And there's no right way. And so again, listening for the cues. There's a rule in improv theater of yes and that is that whatever your partner says in the situation, in the scene, you are going to agree with them and tell them, yeah, oh my gosh, and then build on what they're saying or what they're doing. And even if it's the wrong direction or a direction they don't expect, and they're meant to come back to you with that yes and as well. And so if in parenting, I think that the rules of improv and the rules of being able to find the agreement have served me well in that regard.
I love that. I've never heard that before. The rules of improv and parenting. Like, there are a ton of books about, fatherhood and maybe some rules that might associate with that, but I've never heard of the improv theory. I think that's brilliant. I think you should write a blog about that, because obviously things happen all the time. Like, to me, just like.
Well, yeah, I had a seizure where I broke my face in 16 different places and had to have it rebuilt. It's like bionic face, and my jaw was wired shut. And in New York City, it's a town of reaction and, great pontificators and people who are always yelling at each other. And when you can't yell at anybody, you have to learn to kind of find the agreement in other ways. And and be able to communicate in ways that are maybe a lot more expedient or and perhaps diffuse with humor. So that's kind of where I came up with that, because I had a lot to deal with. So I think it applies to parenthood. It applies to a lot of things in life.
Sure. So you talked about your having a seizure at 40 and being diagnosed with epilepsy. Can you give us like the epilepsy 101?
So, sure. I mean, I've had hundreds and hundreds of seizures, and I never mean to make light of them. My seizures are associated with epilepsy, and epilepsy is essentially you've got too much electricity in your brain. You've got atypical levels of electricity across the lobes, and that results in a seizure, and there are over 45 different types of seizures that can occur with a person. Epilepsy can happen to anyone at any given moment in their life. There are 65 million epileptics on the planet, and probably about 150 million other people who care for them in different situations. So it is a very, very common disorder that has a lot of stigma associated with it. Historically, people with epilepsy, women with epilepsy up until the 80s in some states weren't allowed to get married. I think it was 1952 in the state of Arkansas, they still weren't allowed to get married. There were
What?
Yeah, and some of the rules and treatments are very, very they were very antiquated and shockingly antiquated. Up until the 1970s, there were also epilepsy colonies. So if you were diagnosed with epilepsy and your seizures were not under control with some type of medication, you could find yourself in a care situation that would be less than ideal, and preclude you from different types of education, pursuing college, pursuing the job that you want, if it represented an undue burden to the employer. There are a lot of things. Driving goes away the moment that you have a seizure and are brought to the ER. Your license is kaput for at least a temporary amount of time until a neurologist will sign off on you being safe to drive. The rules are different in every state. So Epilepsy 101 can affect anyone who has a brain. Comes in all different forms and types. So you can have things like absence seizures where you just blank out and you are not there, to full generalized tonic-clonic seizures, which are the kind that I have, which are the kind that you see in the media portrayed often, with the person on the kid in Stranger Things essentially having an attack with the eyes rolled back into the head and possibly, biting their tongue or injuring themselves in some kind of way because you're falling, essentially. And the seizures can last anywhere from 30 seconds to, I've had, to much longer, into 10 or 15 minutes, or repeat seizures over and over again. So that's why the most important thing you can do if you're around someone who's having a seizure is stay with them. Turn them on their side. Don't put anything in their mouth ever, which is contrary to everything you've seen. Don't put a wallet in their mouth. Don't put a pencil. Don't put a spoon. Nothing. They can't swallow their tongue. They're not possessed. And so, I mean, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and so that's what incentivized me to think about writing more about it, writing more about the different personalities, because what people also don't know with epilepsy is there are a lot of amazing people throughout history, whether it was Albert Einstein or whether it's Da Vinci or Van Gogh or Dostoevsky, Florence Griffith, all had epilepsy. And you might not have known it, but people, these are highly creative, incredibly engaging, compelling people living very full lives, in some living under some very stressful situations, in some cases, Dostoevsky and Einstein. Um, and they are producing work that is, and thinking and producing these kinds of ideas that have shifted the world. So there's a lot to know about epilepsy, and there's a lot that's interesting historically about how it's shifted over the years from, again, like people saying, oh, well, epileptics should not get married. The Victorians believed that epileptics were people who suffered from too much sexual preoccupation. So they had their own set of cures, which are not so great. And so instant castration for someone a male who might be suffering from something like epilepsy. That's not, science. Hello.
Yeah, I would never tell anybody that. If I was living back in the Victorian days, I would. You have epilepsy? Nope.
Nope.
Nope. Don't castrate me. Nope.
But this is why we need science, and we need more stories of people who are really living positive, productive, meaningful lives. I think it is possible to live well with epilepsy and find those kind of deep pockets of joy in between seizures. And you may go years with, like, I went 3 years without having a seizure at one point, and almost 3 years. And it's terrifying, seizures. They break all social contracts, but it's the kind of thing where it's so common that we actually do need to talk about it. And thank God we're not in the Victorian era. But it's just there's a lot there that we can learn about neurodiversity, making room for inclusion of all different neurotypes. Again, whether you are on the autistic spectrum, whether you have Parkinson's, whether you're confronting Alzheimer's or early Alzheimer's for the first time in your life, whether you're even just worried about general brain health and memory issues. There's a lot to be learned. So I'm big fan of the brain, and I mean I think it's true what they say. The human brain is, it's weirder. You think it's weird. You think it's just the strangest thing, especially when you look at one and you're like, oh, is that my brain? Holy moly. But you think the human brain is weird, but the human brain is weirder than you can think. You're talking about 100 billion cells, all kinds of electrical connections and neurochemicals, and there's just a lot to know, and we're only at the beginning. So for me, it's curiosity, but it's also a point of survival and a point of, like, finding those moments of joy between seizures and between the harder things.
Mm-hmm. You talk about how epilepsy has taught you that you have to battle to discover who you are, and how you have to find your tribe. Like, how has it taught you? I mean, what has it taught you about finding yourself, or how have you done that?
So by the time I had the seizure in 2015, it's the one that was really the big one. It just broke my face and jaw. I was wired shut. At that point in time, I'd gotten probably one of the best jobs that a writer can get in advertising and media, creative directing, some amazing experiential and digital takeovers of New York City, and working with iconic comic book characters that I was in heaven. Was like, this is it. And making the kind of money that, as a single parent, I felt like, okay, we're going to be all right. And we're going to be okay. This is going to be, I'm finally becoming the person. I'm respected at work. And people are listening to my ideas for really the first time. It's like I'm finally growing up into myself. Well, hey, when did that happen? And so you think you're just about, like, to the in your Mary Tyler Moore kind of moment of throwing your hat in the air, just like I've finally become the person I want to be, and then you're forced to change because you fall down in the grocery store and have a major seizure that breaks everything and leaves you, mute and and blind in one eye for a time, and and healing for the next good year and a half. And then there's all the healing that you have to do that's just, everything else about your mental health, about getting your brain around, that kind of accident. So in terms of me finding myself, I think I'll still be looking for myself when I'm 98. But but in this case, I thought I found myself, or I thought I was arriving, and then I had to change again. And what I realized is that we're always we're always arriving, we're always happening, and there's no ta-da here. You are yeah, it's what is it Sarah Silverman says, you don't deal with your shit's going to deal with you. It was sort of like that. It's like I really needed to sit up and pay attention to my epilepsy because I thought I had it nailed. I thought for a certain amount of time that I'd gotten my seizures under control by 2015, and that I had this figured out. And you don't always have it figured out. It sneaks up on you. Our bodies are really clever at outmaneuvering different medications, and there's a lot you have to listen to. Again, listening to the cues of your own body and your own head, and finding that yes and okay, this is what is working. So that was a big lesson because suddenly I had nowhere to go. My mouth was wired shut. I could write a little bit on a piece of paper in between, the surgeries and the medications and whatnot. But there was a lot of work to do to figure out how to not be devastated by, having been a person who felt good about my appearance and felt privileged by having good health and having done all the things that you're supposed to do. I didn't smoke. I didn't over imbibe. I didn't do any sort of drugs or anything. I was going to yoga and doing my green juice shots or whatever. And so, wheatgrass and all of that. But you can do all the right things, and it cannot. Sometimes it just doesn't matter. You've got different wiring, and then you need to then say, okay, we need to observe and adjust. We need to observe and adjust, and crack the code of what this is and how you're meant to live with it until things. Until technology and science progresses to a point where there are, meaningful cures and remedies for different types of seizures. So I had to find a tribe of people who knew what I was talking about. And no one wanted to talk about epilepsy. And so it took a lot of digging.
Well, it's crazy because epilepsy, like your story right there in the grocery store, it's like life. It's like pretty much the idea of life, like magnified inside of itself. So nobody really knows how long we're here on this earth. Life happens. You think you arrive somewhere and boom, something happens out of the clear blue. And now you have to deal with that. Same in this instance where you're in the grocery store and next thing you know, bam, you have a incident, you have a seizure, you fall, you break bones in your face, and you're wired shut, and everything, right? And it's like, it's the same thing. You can relate it to the same thing. You live with this every day, not knowing when you might have a seizure or an incident where it could be pretty intense. And it's like you have to kind of keep that in the back of your mind and think, well, I need to make the most out of this. Like it's life magnified in itself because, every day I go out to work or I go out in society, I don't really know, what is today the day? Like, I don't know. Will today be the day that I come back home?
It raises the stakes when you have these repeat. I think the biggest disappointment that I had when I was diagnosed with epilepsy was I would be dying repeatedly over and over again in these kinds of seizures, and not dying clinically, but just looking like and feeling like, and the slog back. But yeah, it magnifies your sense of what's important and life, and it raises the stakes on your little moments tremendously, because you just don't know, is today the day? And the thing is that some epileptics have like at the beginning, when I was first being a spazzy girl, I would have these auras, and it would be like stepping into a Donnie Darko movie. And so an aura is essentially this precursor for me. At first, I have a feeling it's called the prodromal phase, which is like, oh, shit's going to go down. Something bad's going to happen. And then I would have an aura. And an aura would be like the world would bend or tilt slightly. Like imagine two projectors in your head, your eyes, right? And one is playing the film forward and the other is playing the film backwards, so in reverse. And so the world starts to look wrong. You're like, oh, I do not feel right. I need to get to, or you see a shimmer of light at the edge of your field of vision. Like I would know that a seizure was coming, and be able to get to a safe spot or tell someone, hey, I'm about to have a seizure. And that was important. And so I think what took me by surprise in 2015 with the big one in the grocery store is that no warning, really. I mean, I had the moment of like, oh, I don't feel so good. But then I was like, no, I can handle this. I'm just going to get some coffee. I'm going to just get some coffee. I only went for one thing. I went for some coffee, and my whole life changed. So I went to buy a can of coffee at the grocery store in New York City, and everything shifted because I had no warning when the seizure happened. And when I'm having a seizure, I have the strength of 10 of me.
So where do you go when you have a seizure? Do you know where you're at when you're having one, or is it completely dark?
So my seizures start out really beautiful. I have this thing called TLE, which is temporal lobe epilepsy. So my first seizure was like being trapped in a Van Gogh painting. It was a starry, starry night. It was the most beautiful fireworks show I have ever seen in my life. I had no idea I was hurt. I wasn't in pain. Then it shifts into this kind of velvety blackness that is so peaceful and fabulous. And I think that I'm not there. I'm just not there. I'm not even a person. I don't even know that I'm gone. It's the waking up, and there's always the waking up stories that are funny. So I don't go anywhere. There's no consciousness. But the waking up stories are ridiculous, because I once I was at a writer's retreat, and I woke up to this, I'd had a seizure, and I woke up to this woman in a Muppet sweater going, dude, you need some weed. And I'm like, wait, what? What happened? What happened? What? And she says, dude, you had a seizure, man. And she looked just like the Muppet, like she's an aging hippie who looked just like that Muppet who Janice or whatever her name is, who has the long blonde hair, who is in the rock band with the Muppets and Animal and all that. Yeah, I don't know her name, but it was just like, oh. So I've had that. I've woken up to someone trying to help me who is a devout Christian and who is trying to speak tongues and pray for me. And I'm like, oh, and are asking me if I was saved. And I was like, oh, I am now, I guess. But I mean, the waking up is the hard part. Often there's a tone of voice that the EMTs always use, which is like, Alisa, you've had a seizure. You've had a seizure, Alisa. Do you know what day it is? And they talk to you like you're I don't know, like you're bad or I don't know, a junkie and or something. And yeah, it's like, no, I don't know what day it is. What another seizure? Oh God, no. Ugh, please. Oh God, no. Did I break anything? Do I still have teeth? Um, is my brain still in my head? Do I have a concussion? I mean, you're asking those kind. You're like, oh no. But the wake up stories can be the most hilarious ones. Like, I've woken up to my really good friend Charles and him saying, Jones, you're fine. You're totally fine. That was a short one. And knowing it's Charles and knowing him and knowing like, oh, I'm fine. I'm gonna be just fine. I'm fine. I'm gonna be fine. And because he knew what to do. So yeah, there's the waking up, which is always the kicker.
So, have you ever had one on a date?
No, I'm trying to think. Not on a date. I've had dates be afraid that I would have a seizure with them, or a significant other be afraid that I would have a seizure with them. But no, I haven't had one on a date. I had one on a shuttle between Silicon Valley and San Francisco with a lot of people who I thought were cute. Like the whole bus was cute. They were all so handsome game designer types and artsy and whatnot. And I was like, no, that's nice. But I had
Did any of them help you? Did any of those cute guys
they
help
were
you?
terrified. Actually, the person who helped me on for that particular seizure was an intern from EA who turned out to be the most amazing person. Um, that we became really good friends. She was incredible. And she came with me to the hospital. And I just was in awe of her level of compassion. There was one other artist and game designer at the company he kept calm and he was always the funny one on the shuttle. And so I ended up nominating him for 'cause you could only not for an award for like best kind of like citizen at our little company. So because he was an incredible he was just incredibly funny, knew how to diffuse with humor, um, person who then was completely normal and amazing working with him going forward. So I'm just grateful for people who can get over it also.
What'd you do at EA?
I was a marketing manager. I was a brand director. I was working on Hasbro games and social and mobile games for women primarily.
So you didn't come up with the EA Sports. It's in the game.
I did not come up with
You didn't come up
that's
with
not
that?
me. I wish I had come up with that. I mean, EA does some great branding. I have to say. They
That's all I remember growing up playing Madden
Yes,
is that EA
it's in the
Sports.
game. Now it's player first. And I'm not sure about that one. But I got to work on some great games like Plants vs. Zombies and Bejeweled and Monopoly, and I got to do some really fun work. So I'm grateful for the time that I had there.
That's awesome. So talk about Gotham Girl Interrupted, this new kick-ass book coming out. You talk about New York quite a bit. Do you enjoy living there? Because it sounds like you talk about a bunch of weirdos that live there.
I love it there. When I say weird, I mean weird is good. I think weirdos will probably save the world. I love the kooky people of New York with all of my heart. And I love that it's a city where the F word is required. I love that it is cultural capital, I think, of the world, and where a smart person and with a sense of a work ethic and discipline can really write their own ticket and really do what they want to do, whether it's education or on the job front. I mean, there's just so much in that city that is changing and alive and full of ideas. It's dizzying, but I mean, it's been going through a lot of it's a place that's always changing. So that you get attached to certain things about New York that you don't want to see go away, and that's hard. Um, but Gotham Girl Interrupted, the book, I would say, is a mix of Nora Ephron, Tina Fey, and David Sedaris. So it's not your typical memoir where it goes in a neat and tidy line. It's a collection of stories, really, and it goes backwards, forwards, and sideways. In terms of books about different conditions and epilepsy and about New York City, I think we hit number one in medical memoirs last weekend on the Amazon's bestseller list, and so that of new releases, and so that was incredibly exciting. I didn't expect that because I didn't expect anyone to pay attention to a book about epilepsy. But
That's awesome. Congratulations on that.
yeah, that was kind of a shocker. But I think the most exciting thing is that New York is this place of possibility where you can really run into anyone and have any kind of story or thing happen. And so it's a place where you just get your stories from the streets. I mean, I'm out jogging in the park and I end up behind some kookadoo famous comedian who just runs like a chicken. And you're like, wait a minute, I'm here. That was just Yoko Ono. Or, so there's, New York is wonderful in that way. You just run into everybody. So I love the city. I'm kind of bipolar that, like, I love either the country, like I'm out at my dad's right now before I go to the next step on the phase of the book tour. And it's the heart of Northern California where they've had all the wildfires and, on a mountaintop, and it's beautiful and it's pristine, except it's burnt. But I mean, I sleep really well in the country and I sleep really well in the city. But if you put me in the burbs, I'm going to be just, it's not gonna work. I'm going to fail at that. I'm not good at the burbs.
Oh man, that's crazy. Like, I don't know. I didn't like, I see you as a city girl. I definitely do not see you as like a country, sit on the front porch and kind
You
of
make your
overlook the
own
mountainous
fun and
range.
you read a
I mean,
lot of books.
that's crazy. I don't get that, but
And I don't know, it's just really peaceful and really beautiful. And there's a portion of the book where I was editing where I was up at in the Berkshires, mountains, so above New York City, so north of New York City, about 2 hours. And, I might not see a single person for a week at when I went on the book, and it just became a little like The Shining at a certain point. I was like, oh, Bruce, I'm so glad to see you, the male guy. Oh, so nice to see you. But I kind of like I like the country, or I like the city. I like to be right in it. And I can't explain it. It's just I love the theater. I love all the weird opinions. I love that everyone has an opinion and that they're not afraid to tear it up. I love that about the city.
I I love the city because everything's right there. I don't know if I can live there. I mean, I've spent nights in New York City, and it's like I think
Yeah.
people just honk their horns to honk the horns. I mean, I'll sit there and see taxis coming by me, and nobody's around them, and they're honking the horn. I'm like, what is going on? And then, like the country, like I am from a very rural area,
I love
and I'm used to that quietness, that all you hear is wind, and I do too. I mean, I think that it helps me get inside of myself, and I can really, like you say, I've never tried this. Like, it's been a long time since I've actually stayed for a long time or a long period in that quiet country area. But like, I would love to be able to read a book and just dive into myself and just kind of have that isolation from society. But man, that is scary. It's scary because you got
I
to get
know.
inside of
Like,
yourself,
is
and
it
it's
going to be
like, I don't
Lord of the
know what's going to
Flies?
come
What's
out. I
happening?
don't
Oh
know
my
what is
God.
going to
Am
be
I,
down there.
am I a werewolf? What's but no, I mean, there's a lot that's scary about being, I think, on your own. But at the same time, I knew that I wouldn't be able to hear myself. I think one of the only reasons my book actually sold in the beginning was that the sense of voice was strong in it. Because I could hear myself and because I had been out in the sticks on my own, really kind of trying to tune in to what I thought about certain things. And it's not just I wrote it back and forth. I went back and
So
forth.
you
The
wrote that
first
book
draft I
out in the
wrote all
country?
out in the country. Yeah, I did. I cranked it out and I did a horrible first draft. But that's what you're supposed to do. Write a really bad book, man. Just go and do it. So I did. And my editor is someone who has incredible patience and a sense of teaching me about how to do this and how to write really a longer form piece of work and not lose the thread. Although I do think there are moments where I do lose the thread, but then I know that a lot of people reading memoirs expect a neat and tidy, well, they don't expect a neat and tidy, but perhaps they expect more of a tidy ending, but it's hard to know again when you're dealing with something like epilepsy or any chronic condition. Like there's no neat and tidy ending. You're still going and you're still sorting out what's going to work for the next step. But listening, I mean, Anne Lamott always says, you gotta get really quiet. So I did.
and
Yeah.
and it sometimes can be freaky. But I can definitely see like the Tina Fey kind of tone in it. Like I get that vibe from you. Like that female comedian, like making these experiences funny, giving that twist, and your personality kind of portrays that. I'm very excited to read this. Like I'm going to admit this, and I'm not proud of it. Like, what is the difference between a memoir and a regular book?
Well, I mean, there's so many genres, and we're all made up of different genres, whether it's mystery or fiction and literary fiction, or a memoir would be nonfiction, presumably nonfiction, and be linear to a certain extent. My book starts more with a cold open of dying in the grocery store, and then you get a certain way down the path with that, and then it goes into the backstory of how everything happens. So a memoir might start at age 5 and go to age, you know, 55 and be linear. And my book's not as linear as all that. It's much more stories, so they're short. And if you've read any David Sedaris, they tend to be like anecdotes about the quirky, weird things that you find and you notice in life. So it didn't follow that structure. And so I think my editor and I, we wrestled about that to a certain extent of like, can you really write nonfiction as though it were a novel? And so, or a mystery, because to a certain extent, I know I say that too much. Often, often I'm fine. I mean, with when you're dealing with a chronic condition, you're playing Nancy Drew to figure out what the hell is going on and to get anyone to believe that, you're not just a hypochondriac, that this is actually real. In my case, I was sort of the opposite of a hypochondriac because the first seizure I had, I didn't want to admit that anything was going on. I was like, nope, everything's fine. Everything's just great. And denial is
Nope, I'm good.
yep, denial, deflection, and as much as possible, nothing else can go wrong. Everything else has to be fine. So denial was my strategy because I needed time to get my head around how I was going to do this or think about it or live with it.
I totally knew what a memoir was. I was just asking for a friend. I'm just kidding.
No, but I mean, some people's memoirs go backwards, forwards, and sideways. Yeah, I know that I struggled with it with my editor. It's like, he had a specific idea of a memoir, and I'm like, no, I want to do it this way. I want to cold it like SNL. And so we're going to do that opening sketch, and then, we're going to bring out the host. And we're going to have the host talk about how grateful they are to be there. And then, continue on with the story and dig into the give some good, like some decent reveals throughout so that there's an arc to things and some musical performances in the middle.
That's awesome. Favorite SNL season or favorite SNL host?
Can I tell you my favorite SNL recent sketch?
Yes.
Because it's hard. I don't get hung up on the host so much. I mean, my favorite person is probably, I mean, Tina and Amy are probably my favorite. They were my favorite people. Gilda when I was a kid. But my favorite sketch lately, I mean, there's just too many people who are amazing. It's like, what? Oh, but my favorite sketch lately is Amazon Silver, and I'll send you the link to it. It was sent to me, and I say I love it because my dad is way into gadgets, because he's just got this engineering brain. And he's reprogrammed his Alexa throughout his house to only respond to him if he acts like Captain Kirk from Star Trek. So Amazon Silver is one of my favorite. It's Amazon for oldsters, but it's awesome and it's so funny and they don't believe it at all. And so yeah, I'm giving it away, but that's probably my favorite sketch, and it's got Keenan and Kate and everyone. Cecily's doing I think the Alexa voice, and so it's pretty funny.
That is awesome. That's amazing. I like that one. I love, and I know this sounds pretty generic, but I love anything with Will Ferrell in it. I really do like the one where he's on Jeopardy and what's his face is Sean Connery and the Burt Reynolds one. Oh,
Yeah.
Norm Macdonald is Burt Reynolds, and he calls himself Turd Ferguson. Like, that is my favorite skit of all time.
I hate women, but I would say Will Ferrell in the cheerleader costume, tremendous.
And when he's and the cowbell, which is the cowbell.
And the cowbell, he's just great. And no, there's no way, like he's just great. No, I mean that's why it's so hard to name your favorite, because there's so many. There's
so many.
Yeah, seasons go up and down. In terms of writing style, and it's so hard right now with the current news cycle to on the one hand it's great for comedy, on the other hand it's exhausting, and it's hard to just do something that isn't terribly we've done so much political humor in the last year, and there's so many serious issues in play. It's hard to know what to write these days, I think, when you're in that position.
Your blog, you have over 30,000 followers on Twitter. So you must be doing something right.
I'm trying. I mean, we were hacked. My blog was my Twitter feed was hacked. So I don't know where I'm at right now, but I mean, I intend to keep going with the Gotham Girl blog no matter what city I'm in. I mean, my hope is to stay in New York City for as long as I can. I think I'm going to have to go back and forth for work stuff, just given the TV stuff and book stuff. But I think I'm going to keep. I mean, I love that the blog has been a space where I could kind of free associate and learn how to write. It's been that kind of forgiving place and really supportive place in times where I've been like, oh, life not so good right now. The next, I think the next step, the thing that I'm most excited about, and where I will transition probably, I have because I haven't been blogging as much, is that I'm moving into, I'm co-hosting a podcast with a good friend of mine who also has epilepsy, and it's called Fits and Starts. And that's going to be beginning in December 15th, on Apple. And so I'm learning to do what you're doing. and
Awesome. If you need any help, let me know. I will try to point you in the right direction. But I think you're doing great. I think you're doing awesome.
I mean, I just hate my voice because I always sound like I'm yodeling. But I've had to get used to it, and I've had to do all these teaser thingies and promotions and whatnot. And I'm like, so for Epic Long Island, we're about to do our first live podcast broadcast for the Epilepsy Foundation in New York, and we were snowed out. I was cursing at the Weather Channel, but that's my next sort of, like, I love radio. I love the old timey radio and all this stuff. So I'm excited to try it. I don't necessarily like what comes out of my mouth most of the time. I mean, I'm difficult to take.
But nobody does. Nobody really.
I'm in a.
Yeah, but nobody really likes their voice.
Oh gosh! Again, I sound like either my, a wimpy. I don't know what I'm not keen, but I'm practicing. We've been rehearsing a lot so that
You have to practice a lot because it's not easy finding your voice. It's not easy. You think this isn't easy, like talking like this. Like, I mean, you kind of like this isn't really. I mean, I don't know. It's weird. Like I get into the zone, I guess, and it's kind of like when I talk, it's like this is regular Trey voice, and then I get into the podcast mode, then it's like get a little bit more colorful and you get a little bit more dramatic, and you just don't want to be like, hey, my name's Trey and welcome to your superiors. You gotta be like, welcome to your superior. You gotta be a little bit more dramatic, and you'll find it. If you have a passion for it, like it's easy to do. It's easy for me. It just takes a while. You have to find your voice. You have to put in the reps, right?
Yes, you got to put in the reps. You really do. And it's the same thing with learning. I've had to learn. If I can learn epilepsy, I think I can probably learn to podcast. We've been lucky so far. We've had a lot of great help. We have original theme music, which I'm very excited for because it's incredible blues riff. And blues guitar, and so I'm excited for it. But I think it's going to have kind of that Samantha Bee, irritated mother, but also my favorite murder kind of feeling about it. But it's going to really focus on finding the funny in a lot of the chronic illness space, because I think it's important. You've got so many people dealing with, whether it's arthritis, whether it's Lyme's disease, whether it's lupus, whether it's epilepsy, whether it's, and not necessarily illness, but chronic condition. And so you've got to dig deep to a certain extent to get some joy. And I think that when we were first talking about doing it, it was like, oh, I don't know. But so far so good. We're just trying to get on.
I'm excited for you.
Yeah, I'd love for you to hear it, and I'd love any lessons. So any tips?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Here's one. Get a nice microphone. They didn't tell me that when I first started. I was using my, I think I had some snowball thing, and it was not good. So do yourself a favor, and step number 1, get yourself a nice microphone, because the snowballs that they refer to in some of the YouTube videos are terrible. They don't pick up a lot of sound. Uh-huh. Yeah, they don't. It's like talking back here. Like, as opposed to talking like this.
See, I was on this podcast a few weeks ago, and it was great.
the woman's voice was incredible, but I couldn't tell if it was her mic or if she's just fabulous all the time. And I was like, I want to be like you when
Well,
I grow up in this world. Um, like,
well, we like to think that we are fabulous all the
no,
time. It doesn't happen
so
like
not
that.
fabulous at all. So, no, I think this podcast is going to be like Gilmore Girls meets epilepsy, for the first. But
That's interesting.
yeah, I think that I definitely don't. We don't have the snowball, so we're not doing that. I think
Well, I want to know, like, how can people get in touch with you? How can they find you? How can they buy your book?
the book is everywhere. It's on Amazon, but it's also everywhere you can buy books in the States and Canada right now. It's in Barnes and Noble. It's in your independent bookstore. If you happen to order my book through an independent bookstore, know that I will do everything in my power to come and sign it for you. On along the tour, and as best and as often and as much as I can. People can also go to iamgothamgirl.com, or they can go to livingwellwithepilepsy.com, because there's a lot of great information there, and that's where our podcast is going to be having a bit of a home until we have everything set up in place. But yeah, Gotham Girl, iamgothamgirl.com. And
I love it.
yeah, so
So, Alisa, the last part of my show, I usually have the guest kind of give a last impression, or like kind of a pep talk, if you would, like a little go getter, a fire starter in the soul. So pretend I am the listener. I am thinking about maybe writing my own blog, maybe writing my own book, my own memoir, or maybe I'm just struggling with, or maybe I have some kind of condition I'm struggling with that I just don't feel confident about sharing that particular part of my life with anybody. Like, give me some kind of words of wisdom, or like a little Kickstarter of the soul to like inspire me to get after it.
I would say, so our brains are really interesting. And the reason they're interesting is they're specifically wired for storytelling. So part of what I like to think about when I'm trying to get myself into gear is that whether it's a message that your brain is sending to your big toe to wiggle, or whether it's words out of your mouth, or whether it's something on the page that you're going to write, our brains are wired specifically for storytelling. They're evolved for storytelling because this is the way we've survived. This is the way we've learned, because the way that the hippocampus works, the way that memory works, is that if we have a story with emotional wins, with consequences, with stakes that are higher and lower, and an arc and characters, this is what makes our brains remember. And this is how we learn. And so if you are struggling with something, whether it's a chronic condition, and whether it's or some type of project you want to get off the ground, being able to change and shift your story and talk to yourself, tell yourself that story, because it's how you make the memory, it's how you make it stick, it's how you change the actual outcome that you're hoping for. It's really important. Our brains, we call ourselves Homo sapiens, but in fact, we should be called something more along the lines of Homo prospectus, because our brains are specifically wired for figuring out alternate futures and different ways of being. And this is something that we're just learning about. And it's something that even if you're not comfortable telling your story to the next guy on the subway, tell it to yourself. Change how you talk to yourself about things. Because I couldn't talk to myself at all. When you're wired shut, you are pretty quiet. But it's an important thing to remember. You can still tell that story, and it's a part of words are the first step on the road to deeds. So get after yourself, shift your narrative, change how you talk about things, change the conversation.
I love it. Thank you so much, Alisa, for coming on the show and giving us a look into your life and how you're being a superior self. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to say thank you to Alisa for coming on the show and hanging out with us today. It was really a fun interview. I want to say thank you to you, the listener. Thank you so much for downloading this episode and taking the time out of your day to listen to what we have to say on here. I hope you guys can be a part of what we're trying to do in the future, and I ask that you subscribe and leave a rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts from. I hope you guys have a great week, and I'm going to leave you with a quote. Always do your best. What you plant now, you will harvest later. OG Mandino. Guys, have a great week, and I will talk to you guys later.